The wind howled across the Langley compound as Karoline Leavitt stepped out of the black SUV. Her heels clicked on the pavement, firm and steady. No press, no aides, no Secret Service. Just her and the red file, still unopened, cradled under her arm like a live wire. Inside, 2 security agents checked her ID. She was led through steel doors, down long corridors lit by flickering fluorescents. Everything smelled of old paper and Cold War secrets. She wasn't taken to a conference room, not to a director's office. Instead, they led her into a dim underground records chamber labeled simply Archive 47C. A thin man in wire-rimmed glasses waited for her. "Ms. Leavitt," he said, voice flat. "We've been expecting you." "How long have you known about this file?" she asked. "Longer than we should admit," he replied. But no one had the clearance or the courage to act on it until now. Karoline placed the red file on the table between them. "I haven't opened it," she said. "Not fully." The man didn't move. "It's not the file that matters. It's what it connects to." He pushed forward a dusty black binder. The cover read, Project Halberd. Karoline flipped it open. Inside, decades of classified intelligence documents, maps, surveillance, photos. A network chart caught her eye: media organizations, shell companies, foreign and domestic operatives. Lines stretched from London to Langley, from New York to Istanbul. One name kept repeating: Global Media Corp. "These," the man said quietly, "are the nodes of influence." Karoline's hands shook slightly. "Why now? Why me?" "Because you got too close," he said. "And instead of running, you stood your ground." She stared at a photo of a much younger Margaret Holloway-S, the same federal judge, shaking hands with a global media executive at a classified State Department summit in 2003. Her voice caught. She was one of them. She was protected. Until you forced her hand. Suddenly, the door burst open. Emily Harper rushed in, breathless. "We have a problem." Karoline turned sharply. "What happened?" "They issued a warrant for you. It's obstruction of classified operations. It's a trap. They're spinning everything. Global media is calling this an illegal leak. The DOJ just froze all files." The man in glasses went cold. "You need to leave, now." Karoline stood, grabbing the red file. "We release everything." Emily stared. "What?" Karoline's voice was calm, fierce. "We leak the truth ourselves. Not through the courts, not through compromised channels. We go live. Full broadcast. The real story, not the edited one." The man in glasses hesitated, then nodded. "You'll need a secure signal. Use Station 11, the old Cold War relay. It still works, for now." That night, the world changed. Screens flickered, feeds were hijacked. A signal cut into major broadcasts worldwide: CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, even TikTok live streams. Karoline's face appeared calm, tired, determined. "This is not just a press secretary speaking," she said. "This is a citizen who saw the truth and chose not to look away. What you are about to see is evidence of manipulation, of media control, of decades-long campaigns to rewrite our realities." And then files played. Real emails, covert footage, internal memos linking Global Media Corp to misinformation networks. Election interference, silencing of journalists across continents. It lasted 10 minutes. By the end, the internet shook. Servers crashed. Governments demanded explanations. Global media stock plummeted 70% overnight. In Washington, an emergency cabinet meeting was called. The White House issued a cryptic statement: "We will follow the facts." But Karoline had already disappeared. Some said she fled to Iceland. Others believed she went underground with Grace and Emily. A few thought she was still in D.C., walking the streets like anyone else, waiting for the next move. What remained was the impact. Judge Holloway resigned days later. James Carter vanished from public view and Global Media Corp. Under federal investigation in 5 countries. But the real change wasn't legal, it was psychological. Millions now questioned everything they heard. Karoline's final words in the broadcast became a rallying cry. You laughed at me in court. You thought I was unprepared. But I was. Never here to play their game. I came to end it. And somehow, she did. The next morning arrived like a storm waiting to break. Outside the Washington, D.C. federal courthouse, dozens of reporters stood under umbrellas, cameras ready. Security was tighter than usual. Metal detectors beeped. Black SUVs idled at the curb. The courtroom had turned into a national theater, and Karoline Leavitt was at the center of it. Inside, courtroom 9 buzzed with anticipation. The judge had promised a ruling. Was it just about the defamation case anymore? Or would it lead to something bigger, something historic? Karoline sat quietly at the defendant's table. She looked. Composed, her hair tied back neatly, her navy blue suit crisp. Emily Harper sat behind her again, this time flanked by 2 Department of Justice observers. Across the aisle, James Carter and Gregory Venn looked visibly rattled. Venn's jaw twitched. His hands were restless, constantly fidgeting with his tie. He had avoided the media all morning. At exactly 10 a.m., Judge Holloway entered and took her seat. She did not waste time. After reviewing the submitted evidence, she said, her voice louder than usual. This court has determined that the red file presented by Ms. Leavitt contains material that may fall outside the boundaries of a civil defamation case and may instead suggest unlawful coordination between a media entity and former intelligence officials. There was a collective gasp. Carter shot to his feet. Your Honor, sit down, Holloway barked. The court is not implying guilt. But I am ordering an emergency evidentiary referral to the Justice Department's Special Counsel's Office for Independent Review. Cameras flashed. Reporters bolted out the doors. Holloway turned to Karoline. As for this civil case, I will allow it to proceed. But the burden of proof has now shifted. Mr. Carter, your client must prove that the press conference content was intentionally malicious rather than edited deceptively by your own network. Carter stood frozen. Venn's face went white. Karoline rose. Thank you, Your Honor. I believe truth will handle the rest. But the courtroom drama wasn't over. Suddenly, a woman near the back stood up and raised her hand. Holloway glared. Ma'am, this is not I have something to say. The woman interrupted. It was Grace Heller, a former foreign correspondent who had once worked for Global Media Corp. She had vanished from the industry after a scandal, something about a suppressed story overseas. I can verify the internal communications, she said calmly. I was told to bury an expose about Global Media's election year contracts in Europe. I still have the emails. A bolt of electricity seemed to shoot through the room. Carter tried to object. Oh, this is not how trials work. Judge Holloway stared him down, and yet, here we are. She turned to the clerk. Get that woman's information. She'll testify under oath tomorrow. Karoline sat quietly, absorbing it all. The plan was working, but even she hadn't expected someone like Grace to emerge. After court adjourned, Karoline stepped into the hallway, instantly surrounded by reporters. Microphones pointed at her like weapons. CNN, Fox, Al Jazeera, BBC, Ms. Leavitt. Did you stage this case from the beginning? Are you going after Global Media's license? Is the White House behind this? She paused only once, her eyes clear. It isn't about politics, it's about truth. Let's find out how far the lies go. Then she walked past, them ignoring the flashing lights. Okay. Behind her, James Carter and Gregory Venn were rushed away by their aides. Venn refused to answer any questions. Carter looked shaken, his once proud posture now defensive. That night, every major news network aired clips of the trial. The red file, Grace Heller. The judge's referral. But somewhere overseas in London, a man in a gray suit watched the footage in silence. He picked up his phone and made a single call. "We have a problem," he said. She wasn't supposed to get that file. The voice on the other end was cold. "Then make sure she doesn't get the rest." The story had exploded beyond courtroom. 9 news channels around the globe led with the same headline: "Red File Sparks Media Scandal." Hashtags trended. Lawmakers began calling for congressional hearings. Former intelligence officials released panicked statements. And inside the West Wing, silence had taken hold. Karoline Leavitt sat alone in her small press office, watching the same footage loop again and again: Grace Heller's sudden emergence, Judge Holloway's stunning referral, and Carter's stunned expression. Her hands trembled slightly. She wasn't afraid, but she understood now. This wasn't just a courtroom battle. It was a war for control of the truth. A knock on the door. Emily Harper entered, her face pale. "You need to see this." She handed Karoline a flash drive. "It's from Grace," Emily said. She didn't want to email it. Karoline plugged it into her laptop. A folder popped open. Inside were scanned PDFs, hundreds of them. Internal memos, payment ledgers. Cum logs between Global Media Corp and unnamed contractors, some clearly linked to former intelligence assets. The most chilling was a confidential briefing prepared for foreign government officials titled "Influence Messaging, U.S. Narrative Channels, Q3 Strategy." Her breath caught. This wasn't defamation. This was information warfare. Emily whispered, "She's risking everything." Karoline looked up. "So are we." That night, Grace Heller testified in court. The courtroom was packed again. Secret Service stood at the back. 3 federal prosecutors sat behind Judge Holloway, silently observing. Grace took the oath. "I was a senior correspondent," she began. "In 2021, I filed a report exposing illegal surveillance operations by a private contractor tied to Global Media Corp. My story was killed. I was pressured to rewrite it. When I refused, I was labeled unstable and forced out." She reached into her bag and pulled out printed emails. "These are internal directives." They instructed media staff to amplify pre-approved narratives, some directly targeting political figures, including the current administration. A hush fell over the courtroom. Judge Holloway didn't blink. "Heller, are you stating under oath that Global Media Corp coordinated with intelligence-linked personnel to manipulate public discourse?" Grace nodded. "Yes, ma'am. And not just here. There were similar strategies in France, Brazil, and South Africa." Carter stood and objected, but it was a weak, desperate attempt. Holloway waved him down. Behind her bench, one of the federal prosecutors leaned forward and whispered into a device. Everything was in motion now. As Grace stepped down, Holloway made an announcement. "This court will recess. The evidence provided today will be sealed and immediately transferred to a BOT, Justice Department task force under federal secrecy protection. Any attempt to interfere with witnesses or evidence will be treated as obstruction of justice." Karoline stood, stunned. It had worked. Outside the courthouse, helicopters circled. Protesters and supporters clashed behind barricades. Foreign embassies released statements. Several senators called for emergency briefings. Back inside her car, Karoline stared ahead. Emily was beside her. "We need to go. The White House is asking for you." But Karoline shook her head. "I'm not going to the White House," she said. "I'm going to Langley." Emily turned sharply. CIA. Karoline looked at the red file in her lap, the original one. It was still unopened, still mysterious. She whispered, "This didn't start with the press conference. It didn't even start with me. This file is real. Someone buried the story a long time ago. I need to know why." The car sped away. In London, the man in the gray suit paced. In his office, the phone buzzed. "Just going to Langley," a voice said. The man's face hardened. "Then we're out of time." The next morning, tension wrapped around the courthouse like a storm cloud. Outside, journalists lined the steps, broadcasting live. Karoline Leavitt stuns courtroom. One headline read, "Is the lawsuit collapsing?" asked another. Inside, the courtroom was full again this time, with more senior reporters, legal analysts, and political aides. Something bigger was unfolding. Karoline Leavitt entered quietly. She wore the same simple navy dress, no makeup, hair pinned back. But her presence was different, calm, calculated. She sat, opened her briefcase, and placed two folders on the desk, the thinner one from yesterday and the red sealed one. Cook, that one still hadn't been touched. Cook. James Carter looked different too, less confident. His client, Marcus Venn from Global Media Corp., sat stiffly beside him, checking his phone every few seconds. Judge Holloway took her seat and struck the gavel once. "Let's continue. Miss Leavitt, you indicated you have more evidence to submit?" Karoline stood, held the courtroom's attention. "Yes, Your Honor. Today I intend to demonstrate that this lawsuit was politically motivated, coordinated by global media executives." And outside political groups, Carter immediately rose. "Objection, Your Honor, this is pure conspiracy. I haven't seen the evidence yet." Judge Holloway interrupted. "Let her proceed." Karoline handed out printed packets to the judge and the plaintiff. "These are internal emails dated 1 week before this lawsuit was filed. They were obtained through a whistleblower at Global Media Corp." A ripple spread through the courtroom. Karoline pointed to one email. "This one is from a senior producer to Mr. Venn. It reads, 'Let's time the lawsuit for maximum exposure. Our friends at the PAC are ready to push it into campaign messaging.'" She paused. And here she flipped to another page, a memo listing a memo. A memo listing a Zoom call with global media, legal staff, and political advisors from 2 major donor-backed organizations. Carter stood, tense. "This is absurd. None of this has been authenticated." Karoline stepped forward. "Then let's authenticate it. The whistleblower is here today. I request the court allow her to testify." Judge Holloway raised an eyebrow. "You brought a witness." "Yes, Your Honor, Emily Harper." The room stirred as Karoline's assistant, until now quiet anonymous, stood and walked toward the witness stand. Carter looked shaken. "She's not a legal expert." "No," Karoline said, "but she worked at Global Media before joining my team. She was present on several internal calls. And she has the original files on a secure drive ready for court review." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Emily took the stand, hand steady. "I worked in Global Media's political strategy division. I handled interdepartmental communications and scheduling for executive leadership. I saw firsthand how the lawsuit was discussed not as a legal matter, but as a weapon. They talked about it as a tactic to silence dissent, specially targeting Karoline Leavitt for her aggressive press briefings." "Why did you leave?" Karoline asked. "Because I couldn't keep lying to myself," Emily replied. "Stopped being journalism. It became election warfare." The courtroom was silent. Judge Holloway looked to Carter. "Would you like to cross-examine?" He stood, approached the stand, but he looked lost. "Miss Harper, do you have any political motives for testifying today?" "No," she said. "I'm here because this case is not about facts. It's about control." After a moment, Carter returned to his table. Judge Holloway leaned forward. "Miss Leavitt, these are serious allegations. Are you requesting the court to expand the scope of this hearing?" Karoline met her eyes. "Yes, Your Honor. I believe this case is part of a coordinated media political operation designed to manipulate public discourse and punish government officials who challenge it." Holloway nodded slowly. "Then submit all supporting documents to the court by the end of the day. I will review and determine whether to refer this matter to federal investigative authorities." Gasps filled the room again. This was no longer just a defamation case. This was turning into something much larger. As the court adjourned, reporters scrambled for the exits. Breaking news alerts went out across networks. Leavitt accuses media giant of political collusion. Social media exploded. But Karoline didn't look at the cameras. She packed her things slowly. As she reached for the red file, her hand stopped. Not yet. The judge hadn't asked for it. And Karoline still had cards to play. She closed the briefcase and walked out with Emily beside her. Outside, cameras flashed. A reporter shouted, "Miss Leavitt, what's in the red file?" Karoline turned, gave the smallest smile. "You'll know when the time is right." Court resumed on a rainy afternoon. Thunder echoed over Washington, D.C., matching the mood. In courtroom 9, the tension was no longer just about Karoline Leavitt's defamation case. It was about something deeper. A network of influence. The collision of press, politics, and power. Karoline entered silently. This time, there was a line of law students in the gallery. Some reporters from international networks. Even a retired judge watching from the back. Word had spread. Something real was happening here. Judge Holloway struck the gavel. "We will hear arguments today regarding the newly submitted evidence and whether this case merits referral to federal authorities." James Carter stood immediately. "Your Honor, yesterday's testimony and documents are not admissible until verified. We request a delay to allow independent authentication." Holloway looked to Karoline. "Miss Leavitt, understand their concern," Karoline said. "That's why I've already brought a forensic analyst who verified the metadata of the files and the source emails. She's on standby." Another stir from the crowd. Holloway nodded. "Bring her in." The doors opened and a tall, sharp-featured woman entered. Dr. Raina Krall, she introduced herself. Digital evidence analyst, former consultant for the Department of Justice. Carter groaned audibly. Dr. Krall took the stand and, with a calm technical precision, confirmed that the email threads and call logs submitted by Karoline were authentic, untampered, and traceable to global media servers. Her report, submitted as evidence, detailed timestamps, server origins, and internal chain of command markers. "These emails are real," she concluded. "Their contents and context match Ms. Harper's testimony." Judge Holloway sat back, her expression unreadable. Karoline stood again. "Your Honor, at this point, the original lawsuit has been overtaken by larger concerns. If I may, I'd like to present one final document." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out the red file. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Even Carter leaned forward, instinctively bracing. Karoline placed the file on the evidence table and opened it slowly. Inside were a dozen pages, typed, signed with government letterheads. "These," she said, "are communications between a former deputy director of national intelligence and executives from Global Media Corp. They revealed direct coordination during the run-up to an election year." Holloway narrowed her eyes. "What sort of coordination?" Karoline didn't answer right away. She let the silence build. "They show a request to strategically shape coverage of certain political figures, suppress press conferences like mine, and even coordinate legal actions when necessary, including defamation suits designed to discredit." Carter was on his feet. "This is slanderous. She's weaponizing conspiracy theories." Judge Holloway slammed her gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Carter." The courtroom exploded with murmurs. Holloway took the documents and flipped through them, reading with growing tension. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Karoline continued. "Judge, this isn't just about me. It's about a growing trend on elected media executives and intelligence. Consultants working together to shape national dialogue, punish political adversaries, and hide behind lawsuits to do it." Emily Harper watched from the side, her eyes wide. This had gone further than even she had expected. Carter tried again. "Even if those emails are real, there's no proof of criminal intent." Karoline's voice was steady. "Then let a federal investigation determine that." Holloway stood. "This hearing is now under judicial review. The bench will take 24 hours to examine the new evidence. Tomorrow, I will make a ruling. The gallery erupted into conversation. Reporters dashed outside. The rain hadn't let up, but now it felt like thunder was inside the courthouse. Karoline sat down quietly. No smile, just calm. Carter leaned toward Ven, whispering in panic. Ven, pale and sweating, didn't answer. His career, his company, possibly his freedom were now under threat. Outside TV networks were already reporting the red file. A CNN analyst called it the most explosive courtroom moment of the decade. On Twitter, Leavitt was trending. Some praised her as a genius. Others accused her of staging a show trial. But inside Karoline's mind, only one thing mattered. Truth had moved from defense to offense. And tomorrow, everything would change. ChatGPT said, the courtroom was full, every seat taken. Reporters from major networks sat shoulder to shoulder, microphones out, cameras rolling. The marble walls echoed with whispers. The case was being live-streamed across the country. The plaintiff, Global Media Corp, a powerful, ruthless, international news giant. The defendant, Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary. And she had walked in without a lawyer. She stepped confidently into the courtroom, her heels clicking on the floor. She wore a dark blue suit, neat and professional. In one hand, she carried a thin leather briefcase. No one expected her to come alone. Not for a case this serious. A defamation lawsuit filed by one of the world's biggest media companies could ruin her career. It could destroy the administration she represented. But here she was, standing alone, facing it all. Judge Margaret Holloway, a tall woman with short silver hair and 30 years of courtroom experience, looked up from her papers. A slight smirk appeared on her face. Miss Leavitt, she said, raising an eyebrow. No counsel today. Leavitt stood tall. That's correct, Your Honor. I will be representing myself. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Some gasped. Some chuckled. Even a few reporters exchanged amused glances. Judge Holloway leaned back in her chair, clearly enjoying the moment. Well, she said slowly, that's a bold choice. From the plaintiff's table, James Carter, Global Media Corp's lead attorney, tried to hide his grin. He was sharp, polished, and dangerous. His suit looked like it cost more than a car. His eyes scanned Leavitt like a hawk looking at prey. Judge Holloway tapped her gavel. Let's begin. Carter stood. Your Honor, he said, his voice deep and smooth. This is a straightforward matter. Miss Leavitt, during a White House press briefing, made statements that falsely accused my client of manipulating public data. These statements were picked up by the media, repeated worldwide, and caused measurable damage to my client's reputation and financial stability. We have video transcripts, expert witnesses. The facts are simple. He handed over a thick file to the judge. By the end of this trial, there will be no doubt. This was an act of deliberate defamation. Judge Holloway nodded. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Miss Leavitt, your opening. Karoline stood slowly. She opened her briefcase and began pulling out notes. One paper slipped from her hand and floated to the floor. She bent to pick it up. Someone in the back of the room laughed. The camera zoomed in. Her fingers trembled slightly. She cleared her throat. Your Honor, she began, this case is not what it seems. Yes, I spoke at a press briefing. Yes, my words were firm, but they were not false. Global Media Corp edited my statements. They twisted the context. They created a lie out of the truth. She paused. Her eyes scanned her messy papers. I have documentation, but I may have left part of it in my office. Another chuckle from the gallery. Judge Holloway raised her hand but couldn't fully hide a smile. Miss Leavitt, this is not a press conference. You are expected to follow courtroom procedure. Do you even know how to submit evidence? Karoline looked genuinely embarrassed. I believe so, Your Honor. James Carter leaned over and whispered something to his co-counsel. They both smiled. From the side of the courtroom, a young woman watched nervously. Emily Harper Leavitt's assistant. She wasn't just an assistant, though. She had once been an award-winning investigative journalist. Now she was watching the woman she admired most struggle in court. Her hands were clenched, her eyes tense. It wasn't going well. Judge Holloway leaned forward. "Miss Leavitt, I advise you to reconsider hiring legal counsel. This isn't the place to guess your way through." Karoline gave a small nod. Understood. She returned to her table, awkwardly gathering her documents. Her hands shook. The cameras zoomed in again. Reporters began typing headlines. "Leavitt falls apart in court." Press secretary outmatched and unprepared, but then just as the judge called for a short recess, a strange thing happened. The courtroom camera caught something. The others didn't. As Karoline reached into her briefcase, a glimpse of something caught the lens. A file, thick, red-tagged. It wasn't part of her scattered papers. It was sealed, labeled with a government emblem. Classified, confidential. She didn't take it out. She didn't even look at it, but it was there. And suddenly everything shifted. On social media, the freeze frame of that moment started spreading. Some viewers noticed the file. Others speculated. What was she hiding? Was she playing a deeper game? In the hallway during recess, Carter was already celebrating. "She's bluffing," he said to a reporter. "We'll be done in 2 days. She's out of her league." But back inside, Karoline Leavitt sat quietly at her table, staring. At the judge's bench, the noise around her faded. She wasn't folding. She was waiting. And the file in her briefcase was waiting to. ChatGPT said. The courtroom filled again after recess. People were buzzing, whispering, speculating. The clip of Karoline Leavitt's awkward opening statement had already gone viral. Some laughed at her. Others felt sorry. A few those who noticed the mysterious file weren't so sure. James Carter returned to the plaintiff's table, confidence glowing in his posture. He adjusted his tie, glanced at the cameras, and smiled slightly. He could smell victory. He motioned for his assistant to prepare the exhibits. They were going to start with the damaging video-edited footage from the press briefing that had started the storm. Judge Margaret Holloway entered the courtroom again, gavel in hand. "Let's continue," she said. "Mr. Carter, your first witness." Carter stood. "The plaintiff calls Mr. Marcus Venn, senior editor of Global Media Corp." A tall man in a gray suit walked up to the stand. He looked polished, rehearsed. He was one of the architects of the News Corporation's messaging machine. Venn, Carter began. "Can you describe what happened the day of the press briefing?" "Yes," Venn said. "Miss Leavitt made a number of reckless claims about our organization, accusing us of fabricating polling data and spreading misinformation. These claims were picked up by dozens of outlets and went global in hours. Were they true?" "Absolutely not," Venn replied. "We have proof every data point was sourced from public records and verified by third-party analysts." "Let's show the court the clip," Carter said. A screen lit up. The press briefing played. Karoline's voice echoed through the courtroom. She looked sharp, serious, calling out Global Media by name. But the clip was fast-cut, focused, trimmed for impact. "Pause it," Carter said. "Your Honor, we submit that these are the words." "That damaged our reputation." Judge Holloway nodded. "Miss Leavitt, do you wish to cross-examine?" Karoline stood slowly. She walked to the podium. Her tone was quiet, almost hesitant. "Mr. Venn, who edited this clip?" Carter objected. "Irrelevant." "Sustained," the judge said. Karoline tried again. "Were you present at the full briefing?" "I was not," Venn admitted. "Did you personally verify the full transcript before this lawsuit was filed?" Venn hesitated. "No, my team did." Karoline nodded. She walked back to her table and pulled out a folder different from the one earlier. This one was thinner. She handed a printed document to the judge and the plaintiff. "This is the full transcript," she said. The part you just saw? It was part of a response to a journalist's question about disinformation in political campaigns. My comment on global media was part of a larger answer involving multiple outlets, not a direct accusation. She paused. The video was edited to make it seem like I targeted global media specifically. James Carter stood quickly. Objection. She's introducing new evidence without foundation. Judge Holloway looked at the document, flipping a few pages. Her brow furrowed. She looked at the court reporter. Please confirm. Does this match the official press briefing transcript from the White House archives? The court reporter checked her tablet, scrolling quickly. Then she looked. Up, it matches. Your Honor? The mood shifted. Suddenly, Carter looked uneasy. Karoline continued. This lawsuit was built on a manipulated clip taken out of context, and this transcript proves it. The gallery was silent. Judge Holloway turned to Carter. Mr. Carter, would your client like to respond to this evidence? Carter cleared his throat. We will need to review its authenticity and intent. But, Your Honor, public perception is not law, the judge said sharply. Carter sat down. From the corner of the courtroom, Emily Harper, Karoline's assistant, smiled. She could see it now, the slow build, the misdirection. Karoline had let them believe she was unprepared. She let them laugh. And now she was pulling the floor out from under them. But Karoline wasn't done. She walked to the podium again, a slight confidence returning to her steps. Your Honor, she said, I believe this lawsuit was not only rushed, it was filed for political reasons. Global media has deep ties to 2 political action committees funding opposition campaigns. I have documents that show coordination between media heads and campaign operatives before this lawsuit was even drafted. Judge Holloway's eyes narrowed. You're alleging collusion. Karoline nodded. And if the court will allow, I will present those documents tomorrow. Gasps. Murmurs. The courtroom felt like it was shifting under everyone's feet. Carter looked stunned. He leaned into his co-counsel, whispering rapidly. Judge Holloway tapped her gavel once. Court is adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow. Karoline gathered her papers. Her hands no longer shook.